ecosystem and the LRS, we're talking about receiving data. So we've talked about for the last few sessions how to send data and what type of data is available to send using xAPI. So next session, next week, we're going to talk about making a business case for xAPI, getting some buy-in, and we'll have Jeff Rubenstein and Amir Bar from Kaltura to talk about how they did it over at Kaltura. And that is kind of where we have been, where we're headed, and we'll move into our presenters today, which is Chris Tompkins and TJ Seabrooks, and they're going to talk about receiving data. With that, I'm going to pass the mic over to you two.
Thanks. All right, everybody. Well, welcome to another session. TJ and I are really flattered to be here. We work at Rustici Software, and at the end of the day, we just help two e-learning companies play nicely with one another. We know more than most about all things SCORM, AICC, xAPI. We work closely with IMS standards as well. We try to team up with ADL to advance these things, and chances are, if you've been in the e-learning industry, you've used something we've worked on throughout the different various tools, from different authoring tool providers to LMSs. TJ and I have helped many of the industry leaders play nicely with one another through a number of different standards and tools. Today, we're going to be talking about LRSs specifically, identifying when to use one, because there's a right and a wrong time, the different ecosystems and deployments that we've seen be successful with these things, how to do conformance testing to be sure you're even doing the right thing, and then some light tools to help you get started, to make your first statements, to capture them, to see them, and to store them. So identifying when to use the right one. There's a lot of examples out there that you could go use, but they are not created equal. And as fun as xAPI's noun, verb, objects, and the crazy ways that all these interconnected statements might become available to you, it's always important to start with an end in mind. TJ and I have been a part of projects that tried to capture everything via xAPI. We've been part of ones that focused in on a little detail, and the strategy will constantly evolve. But knowing the pie chart you want to see at the end of the day means that we can then go argue about the ingredients and order of operations to cook it up. And we need to start with that end in mind to often be very successful with these projects, guiding us to which LRS is right for you. So having that end in mind, I think, is the first tangible step towards working with the standard. We can also then begin to think about, okay, this is your end in mind, but where does the learner click play? Are they logging into an LMS? Are they sitting inside of a huge flight simulator that's tracking their eyeballs? There's a lot of different options for learning and training, and we need to understand, are we trying to get launchable packaged content that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, or are we doing something a little more bespoke? So the standalone LRS becomes one of the most tangible options. This is what most people think of. Examples could be something like Watershed LRS, which is a sister company of ours. It will be the source of truth. This LRS is used to receive data from LMSs and e-learning courses and live in-person training, simulators, games, apps. That big imagination that we've all had for xAPI can be done if you're dropping all of the statements in here. And by nature of that, we expect that you're going to look into that LRS to see the live reports. The pie chart lives in the standalone LRS. So some organizations are choosing to use this as the hub for all of their different training. And that means that this becomes the source of truth for their outcomes. I'm going to let TJ go into...
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Chris. When we talk about a standalone LRS, I want to make sure that we sort of come together and talk about some moments where we're going to have pros and cons, some give and takes. As Chris sort of has talked about, using the right tool, do you need xAPI? This whole thing starts to look and feel a lot like the traditional, requirements gathering stage in a project. And that's what we would encourage you to think about it like. And part of that is understanding the pros and cons of your tools. So one of the things that I would have you understand is, depending on the standalone LRS you're using, it's going to change what tools you may or may not be able to integrate with well. A great example might be the way you would use an LRS with launched content that isn't connected to the LMS? How do you get credentials in place? What are you going to do when that data ends up at the LRS? Is that going to be using a credential that you've hard-coded in the source code, in the JavaScript that a learner could potentially manipulate? That's often the case when people are using standalone LRSs with launch training. But you also have some advantages there. You know, these are going to be places where, because they're not coming predefined with any particular application, you're actually able to tie in several applications. You know this is the way it's intended to be, and you're going to be might not be the case when we talk about LRSs inside LMSs, Chris.
That's right. So in the LMS, you can sometimes have an LRS. And big providers that have been the single source of truth for the e-learning industry for the past many years have now added LRSs to their tool. We've seen it behind the scenes in many of the biggest names, but we need to understand the role that those play, because LMSs that have an LRS might only have statements that they made, or they might turn it on where you can send bespoke statements into it. But it can be limiting if that LMS hasn't come up with a way to build your own reports. Because since xAPI statements can be kind of shooting from the hip in free form, the LMS can report on big stuff, time, completion, pass, fail, score, those type of basics. But if you're putting bespoke content in there, then that LMS needs to go through the effort of giving you a way to visualize that data, to build your own pie chart, to cook it up yourselves. And to be just honest, not many do it well today. I haven't seen a whole lot of off-the-shelf LMSs that are implementing xAPI LRSs in a way that you would imagine to be on par with Watershed or something. So understand using those tools can be okay for capturing data that that tool sees. But if you do intend on doing advanced things with xAPI, when you talk to that vendor, if they're a current customer, or you do an RFP to go get one for your organization, make them show you it working. Send your own xAPI statements to it. Get them to show you the pie chart on the other side, because tangible examples are the way that we begin to understand what we're actually trying to procure, use, and leverage in these ecosystems. TJ, I'll let you talk a little more about the practice.
Yeah, so in practice, what does this look like? How do we handle authentication and receiving that data? One of the things that you're going to find when you're looking at LRSs that have been tightly integrated with an LMS is that things like authenticating for the launch moment. I launch this piece of training. I need to have credentials that are as secure as possible in our sort of launching framework. And I'm confident you guys will get to some things like CMI 5 down the road, which might even have some improvements. But those things come built in when you're looking at an LRS that's been integrated into the LMS, different than the standalone LRS. So you have that already. You're also going to be better equipped to sort of bring that data in if the LMS allows for it. So one of the things that you want to be really cautious about here is there are a lot of LMSs that while they have an LRS internally, that where they're able to launch a piece of content and track it, they haven't actually designed that application in a way where they're expecting you to bring in xAPI data outside of the LMS. Or potentially worse, in my opinion, is they haven't designed it so that you can get the data out of that LMS and take it to some other LRS, some other tools. And that's really a big problem here if you're running into LMSs like that. When we look at xAPI, one of the things we want to make sure we're providing is data interoperability. Is the data the same everywhere? But data portability, because these are the things that are going to take the moments that you and I have certainly run into where we're in the middle of a 3-year LMS migration because of data and shorten it. That's the end goal here, is can we take that and move it more easily? And that's hugely important. And that's one of the things we want to be really careful of when we're looking at LRSs inside the LMS. Do we have the ability to get additional data in? Are the built-in reports good enough? And can we get our data out to another system? We don't want to put ourselves in a place where the LMS is causing us to silo our data and not letting us move it.
So that leads us to a more likely scenario of multiple LRSs floating around in the world. And this is okay. Because in my opinion, people care about different stuff. And I don't think it's fair to say xAPI statements must do this one thing, because we see different audiences be interested in different things. So a real world example. I like to use healthcare as an easy one because they have a lot of compliance training. A nurse takes continuing education credits in their LMS. They take a course that has a beginning, a middle, end, some videos, and an assessment. And we get to say, ta-da, TJ the nurse knows CPR. Maybe. He certainly sat there for 63 of the required 60 minutes and passed with a score of 95. Ta-da, TJ knows CPR. And in fact, we trust that so little that the next mandatory step in TJ's nursing training is that he must push down on the Rustici dummy and blow into its mouth in the right way. And certainly a lot of those Rustici dummies can have a little computer in them. They track methods and metrics, stuff that's not on a paper certificate that says TJ finished the training. They know forcefulness of chest compression, breathing rhythms, volume of breath, method, skill, trainer, all types of cool stuff. So each one of those types of data points can become an xAPI statement. And it turns out that it might need to multi-tenanted go out to many LRSs at once, because the nurse cares for their professional education, the hospital cares for compliance, the manufacturer of that Rustici dummy probably wants to see how people are using it in aggregate. The trainer is a third-party consultant, and they want the reports for their own internal needs. People care about different data. If you end up with an ecosystem that has more than one LRS, we can use statement forwarding, the portability that xAPI provides, to either send all of that data where it needs to go in real time, or maybe even use statement forwarding to shuttle it around so that people can build the pie chart they want. This capability to connect activity providers to LRSs is one of the ways that, as TJ was talking about, we want to get rid of silos. We want to help data portability be shareable and to allow different applications to view data in different ways. But it's not easy to do. TJ, tell us why.
Yeah, and one of the big things, and we talked a little bit about interoperability, and I saw there was a question sort of about firewalls and some of those moments. When we get to some of the things like firewalls, we're actually looking at things that exist outside of the xAPI specification. When we talk about xAPI, imagine that we have a way that is not that dissimilar from what happens when you click a button on a website. Your browser sends data to a server. The big difference here is that we're sending xAPI data. So anything in your organization that restricts where data can move, if you're in a firewalled off environment, then that's going to apply to xAPI in the same way. And that's one of the reasons that I've been talking about the security, the interoperability moments, because this is where you have to start getting your IT team involved. When we start talking about using multiple LRSs, we're going to find that we actually want to use, a particular LRS because it has a feature we need. What does that mean? You're all going to look at a lot of LRSs as you go through the project. You're going to see Watershed, Yet, Learning Locker, Veracity, SCORM Cloud. And all of these have sort of some different inputs and outputs, but more importantly, they're geared towards different problems sometimes. Where one tool might provide a user interface that lets you explore that data and do reporting. Another one might be for use in an organization that says, actually, we don't need that functionality. We have a large data analytics team. We are a Tableau Power BI shop. And in that case, you might choose to use something that is simply implementing the LRS API specification so that you're able to receive and transmit that data, and then you're actually going to pull it out and do reporting in your own system. But either way, you have to navigate that moment of what are we going to do with it? How do we get the data into these other LRSs, and what type of LRS do we need? Again, I want to emphasize avoiding data silos. One of the big advantages of xAPI is that we're finally going to be able to get to a place where we can look at data next to the other business data in the organization. So if you can bring in the HR data, the learning data, the performance data, all of a sudden we can report on a much fuller picture, and we can enable different departments, especially in our large enterprise customers. We see this where they're actually using LRSs in different departments geared towards different needs, with different people sort of owning the security needs of that.
So that kind of leads me to some sane advice here of use the right tool for the right reasons. I'm a car guy. I can go work on my car and I can use a screwdriver, a socket, and a wrench. And they're all identical tools because they all turn a threaded bolt. Not really. It turns out that one is way easier to use than the other, depending on the situation you find yourself in. And trying to use one because you just bought it and it's new doesn't mean it's going to make your life easier. It means that you're holding the wrong tool for the job. So use the right LRS for your needs, use xAPI for the right needs. And I think that there's a world where we're blending SCORM, AICC, xAPI, CMI5, different LRSs and different LMSs together, because these tools are only used to help two e-learning companies play nicely with one another. And you should use the tool in the toolbox that is easiest to accomplish your goals, as long as we go fetch that data in the right way. Hopefully we can turn it all into xAPI to make it easy, but that doesn't mean that it's your only option. We've seen success with organizations that had everything in Power BI. And when you talk to them about the pie chart they want to build, well, you've got all these things in Power BI. Why go use this tool because it's neat and fun? It's only when we need all of these folks to get along and to play nicely with one another that we can begin to explore your options. So to get an LRS, you could DIY it. You could build your own. The ADL specifications there, you can go write your own. We think that's great. Ask us anything really if you get into the weeds. You could look at open source options for your LRS. Learning Locker is an easy example to go to. Your skills are needed when it comes to manipulating that individual piece of software. We also have OEM integratable options. That's what TJ and I do all day. We hide behind the scenes in big platforms and we'll offload the need for the technical bits, but give you an API to integrate with. You could use something like SCORM Cloud, which we're actually going to look at here in a second, to begin to play with. Or you could get a full-featured LRS like we've talked about through Watershed, Yet, and some of the others that are out there. Sometimes you need a wrench, sometimes you need a socket, sometimes you need a screwdriver. Don't use the tool for the sake of the tool. Use it because it's the right fit. So if you're trying to figure out if your idea is any good, you should probably go check your LRS against the conformance test. ADL is put this out here. This is a great way that a faxer-friendly moment, you can determine if the thing you're using is even designed to play nicely with the things that it needs to do. One that has passed is the SCORM Cloud. We offer a free hosted LRS for anybody on this call or in the world to begin to use. It's easy to get started with. You don't have to go through the technical headache of setting up a server and doing things. It's simple to manage endpoints and activity providers. It automatically converts the SCORM and AICC content you're playing in it into xAPI statements and stores them in the LRS that our tool also includes. If you're looking to make a shift in your organization and, well, you've got this big library of older stuff, we have ways to just let you keep doing what you're doing, but get the data in the format that you want. And then, of course, our tools include what's called statement forwarding. We want you to pack up your toys and go play nicely somewhere else, if that makes sense. And it could be that you outgrow our tool. It could be that we're part of an ecosystem. We don't actually care about the reason. We want to make it easy to send that out. So to look at it a little tactically here for a second, this is essentially our LRS. It gives us the ability to set up multiple different endpoints, and you can begin to capture data right away, again, instead of going through the weight of setting up your own and configuring your own. Once we're in there, we have the ability to configure different activity providers. These are going to automatically generate the secret key and the user ID that you need in order to connect these things together to make sure that people are allowed to put their crazy statements into your LRS. This is a really human approachable one, and we support basic auth and OAuth and all the things that you would expect. We can also then come in and begin to see reports. This one I'm sharing here is actually a SCORM report. These are my rules of golf. It's like the most boring course in the entire internet, but it does a good job at benchmarking. So when we launch these type of courses, we'll just call them legacy courses that we normally see in an LMS. you can see we're tracking completion status, pass-fail status, score time, the big four, as TJ and I would call them. We're able to see in individual interactions to each question, whether they're right or wrong. This has been e-learning for 20 years. Cool. If TJ and I asked the entire e-learning industry at once to please go open your authoring tool and resave every course you've ever built as xAPI, it wouldn't go anywhere. Everyone would just say no. So what we do is we just convert it on the fly. It's easy to take that SCORM data and turn it into an xAPI statement. And we do this whether customers ask us to or not almost every day. Chris completed the golf course with a score of 27, and we go in and convert all of those interactions into individual xAPI statements. This is us trying to help folks get up to speed faster, especially in big corporate organizations where you might not be able to move the earth, but you can get the data you want. Finally, we have the ability to forward statements or to pipe them to other LRSs. And this is that ecosystems moment. This is the thing that's going to allow you to go ahead and build, go ahead and get started. And even if you find a better tool later on, send these statements to where they need to be. I want you guys to be able to get your hands dirty as quick as possible. And the SCORM Cloud is one of the easiest and most approachable, completely free ways to actually start to use these things without getting too mired into how to set up, configure, and manage your own learning record store. I think that there's far more value into making statements and seeing the pie charts on the other side than there is to building the LRS and getting it conformant. So please feel free to use ours, and we want you to go check it out wherever you want. Finally, and I think that we'll certainly be able to follow up with this list of links, but these are some helpful resources to help everyone on this call get their hands dirty. TJ and I love it when people just start using statements and stop thinking about them in the ethereal ways. So here's a way to get started with SCORM Cloud for free. Here is ADL's list of conformant LRSs if you're looking for a very formal thing to maybe socialize internally at your company. We also have the test suite. This is a procurement moment. Facts are friendly, guys. If vendors are going to be selling you xAPI stuff, you should at least see it catch or send statements and make sure it is the way you want it to be, because it's a sad story when they sold you a screwdriver and a wrench shows up. That's not what we want. And then finally, at xapi.com, we've published a number of free and open source client libraries designed to help people make statements. The value is being expressive in these statements. And so those client libraries are there in a variety of different languages to help you guys drop those little xAPI statements where they need to go and to give you a free LRS to send them to. So we love talking. It's a great picture of me with straight hair. TJ, thank you. That's a surprise. We're here to answer questions if you have them. TJ and I love just shooting from the hip here and talking people through problems. At this point, what can we do to turn the floor over and kind of scratch in a little deeper? TJ, maybe you've seen some things in writing there that we should talk about?
Yeah, and I did answer some of those questions in the chat there around some of the LTI and Tableau use cases and what it looks like to sort of start connecting that data to other places. I'll say sort of in the xAPI space, as you guys learn more, we're in a moment in the community here where we're actually going to see some of the ability to connect xAPI data sources to each other hopefully get easier, because what's going to happen is we're actually going to be separating some of the complexity of authentication from the specification. Today, LTI 1.3 is primarily single sign-on. I'm in one application, I want to get to another, and I don't need to have several passwords and log back in. Instead, what we're going to say, though, is that when we get into newer versions of xAPI, we're going to take out the expectation that this is the one true way to do authentication, because it turns out that security is a really hard problem and it's a moving target. And one organization is going to have a completely different requirement from another. One of the big problems we've helped DoD customers, some of our large enterprise customers with, is sort of taking the xAPI data model and transport, but actually letting them use some of the authentication models that are already approved in their organization because they have security requirements that can't be moved. And that's right. That's going to be in the xAPI 2.0 release as that comes out, and it's going to break that apart. So pay attention to what happens there because it's going to open up a lot of opportunities for you to change the way authentication works and hopefully unlock some of these barriers to getting data in and out, because you'll no longer be facing an IT department that says we absolutely can't allow this because xAPI communication only uses basic auth. And we know that a lot of our customers have faced that kind of pushback. All right. I think that's most of the questions I've seen.
There's a pretty good one here, TJ, from Stephanie. Is there a way to take data in the real world, like what's on her iWatch, and convert it, sending those statements to an LRS? Say she created a course on jogging, and she wants to do a level 3 analysis on whether the learner actually did what she taught them in the course. What would you recommend, as we're going to wave our hands at a lot of things here? Talk us through where those xAPI statements would theoretically come from and where we'd see the pie chart.
Yeah, no problem. So if this was a project you were going to undertake, I think you'd be using a lot of the APIs that Apple has made available through what they call HealthKit if you were committed to using your Apple Watch. And when you dig into the HealthKit API, you'll see the ability to pull back data points and things like that. But you'll own the responsibility for taking those data points and figuring out how to represent them in xAPI. One of the conversations coming up, and I think it's week 6, we'll have some of the conversation with Jason Haig and Aaron Silvers around xAPI profiles. And that's going to be one to pay attention to if you're looking at going into a project where you're going to be pulling some raw data from something like an Apple Watch and trying to represent it elsewhere in an LRS. Because what those profiles are going to do are really help you define, when I'm looking at data about this is the best way to do it. And that's going to be your hardest problem in getting that data out. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at pretty straightforward APIs and applications that can do extract data from that API, do the transform to xAPI, which is your hard part, and then simply send that off to an LRS. There are libraries that would help you with the statement creation at the link Chris was showing, but actually getting the data out of that watch and deciding how to represent it as xAPI is definitely going to be the hardest problem.
Hey guys, I have a question. This is Megan. I have a question from Miranda. Do you have any good stories about how you onboarded a company to leave the bounds of an LMS only to using an LRS and using xAPI?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Go for it.
So as Chris was talking through SCORM Cloud and he showed that sort of sample of a SCORM course and the corresponding xAPI statements, early on, we've had a number of customers who are in large enterprise organizations with SCORM courses. And they said, we think xAPI is what's next. How do we prepare for that so that we're not having to do a lot of work multiple times? And it's the reason that we added to our product the ability to take the SCORM data and convert it into an xAPI-based representation of that data. That let that organization build a single reporting system that knew how to look at all of their xAPI data. And instead of trying to shove in data from somewhere else, they use this tool to, in real time, as a learner was taking SCORM courses, start populating their LRS with the xAPI data that corresponded. This lets them sort of start moving slowly towards xAPI. And it also then lets you not lose the availability of all the old courses, right? And that's going to be the situation in almost every large enterprise organization. Is the only way to sort of fund and get an xAPI project like this started is if you have a way to salvage the existing content and bring it with you. Again, as you look at xAPI profiles, you should find the ADL SCORM profile where they've actually published, if we're going to report on SCORM courses using xAPI, we'd like them to look like this. And using a model like that, we're able to sort of get started. As we take SCORM courses, we don't even have to have any content authored in xAPI yet. We can simply start taking the existing data, looking at it in xAPI so that we have it. And now when we have that next xAPI-based learning experience that we procure into the organization or a data source that will support it, we can plug it in with the other data. And we haven't had to go through this huge transformational revolution in the L&D department to get started. We have to find more ways in the enterprise space to make getting down the road of huge enterprise transformation a step-by-step process. Chris likes to call it the crawl, walk, run approach, where you start out crawling, you say, we're going to use our SCORM courses, but we're going to represent that data in xAPI. You're going to use something like Domino that can take a SCORM course and also embed xAPI data into it. And that's going to be where we start. Now, down the road, when we procure our next tool, it doesn't have to be SCORM. Our organization has started using xAPI, so we can put that on the actual vendor and say, do you support either of these? And over time, we actually want to get to a place where we're able to just tell all our vendors, you must support xAPI. But you have to slow walk there for sure.
Okay, so speaking of the slow walk, last time I saw you two, actually saw you, human to human, we were having a nerdy little conversation, just the three of us off in the corner of a big expo hall. And as I came up, you actually laughed, right? Saying that right, is anybody still talking about xAPI anymore? Or have we moved past? So obviously today I asked you here, and Jess asked you here to talk about xAPI. But can you, as you two are looking at the industry overall, right? Where is the conversation moving to? Can you kind of invite everybody here at Cohort into our nerdy little
so
that we have there?
Chris, if you look back at the beginning, and Chris says, make sure you have to use xAPI, right? And that's the sort of the bite-sized chunk of the thought. But what we've seen both in the customers we work with, the large enterprises that we and some other folks we're close to work with, early on in the xAPI lifecycle, we were very worried about, we're going to go use xAPI. It's going to enable a lot of things. As we've moved and xAPI is maturing, and especially as you look at the IEEE process, it's becoming more and more clear that xAPI really is one of the tools to solve a problem. So to your point, Megan, the people we're talking to today, they're not showing up. The most sophisticated customers we talk to today aren't showing up saying, we want to use xAPI. Instead, they're showing up with a problem. And that's why I call it requirements gathering, because the way this presents is someone shows up and they say, we want to, and I had this call literally 3 weeks ago. They said, we want to be able to do sales training efficacy analysis. And you go, okay. And they say, we think we need xAPI. And I go, maybe you need xAPI. What data exists already? And they go, oh, well, actually, we have Salesforce data in this format. And we have this data in this format, and we actually have a data lake that we already use. And I go, all right, stop. Okay, so you have that data, it's in one shared place, and you have a team of analysts that know how to use high-level analytics tools. What are you hoping to get out of xAPI? And that was the moment they went, oh, thank you so much. We're going to go back and revisit and figure it out. What did we want to get out of xAPI? In their case, they came back and said, actually, we think there's still value in xAPI because we can see further down our procurement roadmap, and we know there are some tools that already support it. And I think that's where you're headed. You're headed to a place where an application you procure already supporting xAPI should be a thing that makes it easier to integrate it into the rest of your ecosystem. But it doesn't have to be the entire backbone of your ecosystem unless it's appropriate. There are going to be a bunch of places where it's appropriate. If you're just starting out and you're building it and you say, this is our one true backbone, we speak xAPI, great. But if you're in an organization that has a 20-year history of doing data analytics and they were on the pioneering front of that, moving to xAPI probably doesn't unlock anything for that team. The best thing it gives them is, at least for all of the learning and training data, it's coming in one format, and we only have to implement and support one standard for bringing data in from external applications, instead of the world we're in now where we are building one after another of purpose-built integrations. But those purpose-built integrations are also tend to be easier to build than ever before. I saw someone mention Zapier in the chat. You can get in with your hands today as a non-technical user, use Zapier to go look at the data in a bunch of business tools with a drop-down menu and map it to xAPI data and have it send that data into an LRS. You can do that today. And that means that xAPI isn't the most important part of that. The most important part is, how do I go find the tool to help me get the data I need to the place I need it? And it's sometimes xAPI. I think that probably aligns with some of the experiences you've had, Megan, in the last couple of years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But you're much more eloquent about it sometimes.
I do my best. But it is a real problem, right? Getting people to a place where they're able to go work on a problem and move away from the technology. And that's as much sort of the fault of ed tech vendors as it is just the idea of, no, this thing is new and exciting, and we all want to be working on the new exciting thing in our organization. But sometimes we just have to focus on what's the best tool to get the job done.
I answer the crazy phone. So anytime somebody's first words are, I need xAPI, I need SCORM, I need AICC, I need LTI, I go, okay, what are you trying to do? It always just comes down to, what are you trying to do? And we'll go find the right tool for the job. Yeah. I love xAPI. I think it's a great tool, but it's not useful for everything.
Megan, we worked on xAPI. We helped design it in version 0.90, and we find opportunities every day to recommend SCORM. Not because xAPI is not great, but because they might have tooling that already exists. They might be in place to go do it immediately, and there's not enough benefit from them taking on an extra sort of tech burden to go learn.
Thank you, Chris, TJ, and Megan, for that conversation. I think that you've gotten to all the questions in the chat. So I'm going to transition us into some team updates. So thank you for sharing. You threw out a lot of ideas for some great teams too. So I hope folks are listening and got that ideation. I'll move right into where your team should be now. And I think that that's a fine place if you want to think. Yep, TJ and Chris, thank you for being here. We appreciate that. And where your team should be, we're now moving into the third of cohort, right? So cohort is 12 weeks. We are now in week 4, which means that teams are starting to report out. Teams have started scoping, assigning tasks, iterating, really starting doing the work. And so this week is the first time that we'll have some team updates. And I'm going to walk you through the process of submitting your updates. And in the mailer, in the full mailing that goes out on Fridays, you'll have a resource to reference the steps on how to submit your updates. So each week, every team that is doing work with xAPI reports out what they're doing in this full session. It's important that you're reporting out because you get to get feedback from folks in the chat. You get to share out what you're doing and inspiring other teams. So this is an important part in the collaborative, kind of broader collaborative part of cohort. So it is really important that folks submit their updates on Wednesday nights or early Thursday morning, so that way I can check the updates and kind of get a feel for where you all are. So the way that you submit updates is via GitHub. I'm going to share my screen now so that we can be looking at the GitHub space together. So the way that you request access to get into GitHub, you can do that in Slack. If you still need some support navigating that bot in Slack, feel free to tag Matt Cleaver or I. Matt Cleaver, I'm over his head here. So that's Matt Cleaver, and I'm Jess Jackson in Slack. That's how you get into GitHub. Once you're in GitHub, you join the xAPI cohort and you join the fall 2020. You can see that right now we have 3 teams that have created their team pages within GitHub: Team Down Under, Team Early Childhood Education, and Team Zoom. When you are submitting your updates, there is a certain way that you should write your updates so that it automatically goes to our website so that we can look at them together on these web sessions. So the way that you should submit your updates is right in our fall 2020 page. Right here, we have the team templates, or how your cohort team should be set up. And then when you're doing your team update, you can click on this team template, and this is how you submit the update. So the update should be submitted with your team update first, and then the date. And then you're going to put the speaker name, so that way we know who's going to be presenting your team update. And you're going to talk about the accomplishments that you had for the week, where your team might need support, and what you hope to accomplish in the next week. And then we will be able to review these updates on the call so that other folks can give you that information. The way that we see all the team update is right on our website, and it automatically populates. So Team Down Under, if anybody is on the call to share their update, then we would ask you to tell us in chat if you're able to share your update. Oh, my screen is not sharing appropriately, is it?
I will say, Jess, Team Down Under is asleep right now, most of them.
That's true, Megan. That's true. So I'm just going to share their update for them. And make sure that we're on the correct screen together. How's that? So Team Down Under, you are in Australia and most of you are asleep, but they initially developed and started connectivity with Learning Locker. They did some hotspot feed from NASA. They initially developed their demo, and they have started scheduling their meetings for Saturday. If you are interested in participating in the Team Down Under and what they're working on, they have their repository there. Feel free to check it out. Check out their website at xapicohort.com/teams, and you can check out what they're doing by also joining their Slack. Team Early Childhood Education, they have a prototype built in Twine. Joanne messaged me before the meeting to let me know that she wouldn't be able to give her update. They have a prototype built in Twine that will be posted to GitHub this weekend. She's going to look at the use of xAPI to capture skills performed during nature play and making use of technologies that they've been playing with in the past, so like Pebble and different apps. So if you're interested in Team Early Childhood Education, you can learn more about them by clicking their page and also joining their Slack channel. The third team that has their GitHub up and running this week and also has their update submitted is Team Zoom. And Matt Cleaver, are you going to talk about Team Zoom today? Is Matt on the line?
Matt is on the line. Do you need to unmute him?
I'm giving him add moderator access. Yep. How about now, Matt?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I guess it didn't work before. So we just started this team. We're thinking about how we can connect Zoom to xAPI. So I had created a small boilerplate code sample, but we're going to have a meeting in about half an hour at 3:15 Eastern. If you want to go to our Team Zoom Slack channel, we have a link to the Zoom if anybody's curious. So we haven't really started and narrowly defined what this team is going to do, but getting the results of a meeting poll was one idea, which could be pretty cool. There's a bunch of other stuff. So if you want to visit that Slack channel, also the links here, we have a team repository that I just started that just has some links and stuff in it. So feel free to come and join. We're going to, at the first part of our team meeting today, we're just going to talk about what do we want to do. And then the last section is going over some of that starter code that I put in there. And I'm currently I set up the team and set up the GitHub, and I'm going to be leading the Zoom meeting today, but I'm not necessarily the leader. If anybody wants to lead, may have time to do that weekly, feel free. So like I said, half an hour, be meeting together live.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. So if anybody's interested in joining Team Zoom and even leading, that opportunity is available. So those are the team GitHubs for this week, and that is completely fine that not every team has a GitHub page set up. I have pulled in the list of teams that have formed. So if anybody is on the line for any of these teams, just let me know and I'll give you some mic access so that you can share out your team update. So is anyone from Team Captivate JavaScript Library? All right. Team HR Open Standards. Brian, I'm going to give you access. Did you want to share out a team update? Let's see, Brian. You should have mic access now, Brian.
Okay.
There you are. We can hear you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is Brian Duck. I've added a Slack channel for Team HR Open Standards Assessments Work Group. I know it's a mouthful. We also added a cohort channel description. I'll let you go into the Slack channel and read that. To summarize, weekly meetings are happening with the HR Open Standards Assessment Work Group Fridays at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Zoom links are being posted in that Slack channel, and any xAPI cohort members are welcome to join on the Zoom. Alternatively, you can post questions in the Slack channel that will either be answered directly, or you can request that we take the question into the HR Open discussion, and we can either discuss it with assessments or forward it to the other members of the HR Open team. Again, as we are supporting HR Open organization and they maintain their own presence on GitHub, we have not yet established a GitHub repository for this team. So one of the things we might do if we wanted to do one within the xAPI GitHub area would be to add in the current version of their standards, if that would help somebody, or we could at least post links out there. So it might be worth building one for our own.
Awesome.
If you want me to continue, I have other updates for Team Makey Makey.
Go ahead for Team Makey Makey, and then we'll ask Cultura after that.
Okay. So the Team Makey Makey channel is discussing changes to the GitHub to capture the latest changes and videos recorded for the xAPI party last spring. Also, we're considering an update to the learning record provider code that was completed for iteration 3, which would allow cohort members to utilize the LRP created in live code without necessarily linking to the Makey Makey unit. And Joanne Rosequist, I don't know that she's on the line right now, but she has mentioned she wanted to incorporate early childhood education applications with Makey Makey. And we'll be looking at supporting that integration as part of our project.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Brian.
So if I can make one other mention, we've set up discuss-dev.livecode as a discussion channel. And we'll be looking at some of the live code issues in there. And then I've also posted a question to discuss -LMS-LRS that I'm looking to install a local LRS. So if people are interested in that, take a look at those discussion channels in Slack. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brian. If anyone from Team Kaltura is here to give your update, and then the next team that will be sharing is Team Mini Project Glossary. So if there's anyone from either of those teams, Kaltura or Mini Project Glossary, go ahead and share it in the chat. All right, how about Team Page View? All right, Madeline, what is your team's name? And have you created a Slack channel? I'm going to just give you mic access, Madeline, so that you can share your team update and share more about your team.
Hello.
Go ahead, Team Storyline Engagement.
So we just created the Slack and GitHub team, and we start determining the data points and making the list. And we set up like weekly meeting, and we'll be like start setting up. The team members going to like start setting up the accounts and the resources, and onboard on the software, so get familiar with it. And next week we're continue working on the data point list, and then start working on where the xAPI statement can apply on the our existing storyline file.
Awesome. Thank you for that update, Madeline. Are there any other team representatives from Team PageView, Team Pebble, Team Podcast, Team SharePoint LMS integration, Team Storyline LMS, or Team Unity 3D that would like to give a team update? All right. Seeing as there's no update there, we're going to move right ahead into our good stuff to know before wrapping up. So every week we are here right here in our Kaltura live room. The link is there. The link is also available on our GNOME. So if you're following us on xAPI GNOME on Twitter, right in our bio, you'll be able to access the link to our New Row room. Next week, we're talking about making the business case for xAPI, and we'll have Jeff Rubenstein with Kaltura here. And as always, our xAPI party is open to register, and we are accepting proposals. The link to submit a proposal for presenting for the xAPI party will be sent out to you in your weekly update. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can feel free to email me, justjackson@jjackson@torrancelearning.com, or message me directly in Slack. We hope that you have an awesome weekend, an awesome Thursday, and get out there and make something.